So really excited to have Jennifer and Jeremy Perkins on. Hey guys.
Hey, thanks for having us, Josephine.
Yeah, you guys have been rocking and rolling for quite some time, many years. When did you guys get started?
Well, so Jeremy and I are on and we're on separate screens. As you can see, Jeremy's actually driving right now. So I'll kind of take the lead and then call on him, hoping that he's available when I do. But we both have been in real estate for a while. I quit my job in 2019 and went full time in real estate. And then Jeremy has been in real estate for even longer than me. But that journey from 2019 to now has been where we built our first self storage facility and managed that, flipping houses, building houses, doing land development, building custom luxury homes. And that's what we've been doing over that time span. And then before that, I had several different jobs. I lived in Germany for a while and worked for the military. And then Jeremy, he was doing jobs for others. Jeremy, do you want to tell a little bit about prior to 2019 what you were doing?
Yeah, I got my start in real estate in 2006. I bought my first house in 2006, flipped my first house in 2006, bought my second house in 2007, and with the intention to flip it, the market crashed and actually still own that house today. And it's been a good rental ever since. But that's where I broke my teeth in real estate. From that point on, I've always been in construction since high school. Done a lot of houses, built a lot of houses and flipped a lot of houses for other investors and other owners, and did a lot of construction in the apartment community, flipping apartment complexes and things like that, which led up to, as Jennifer said, us coming together in 2019 and just doing full-time investment real estate together.
Did you guys both grow up in the Dixon area, West Tennessee, or west of Nashville?
Yeah, we both grew up in the same county and close to the same towns, but we actually didn't know each other until 2011 is when we met.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about, you guys obviously are married, working together. I know we have some students that are also trying to kind of build that with their significant other. What are the advantages and also maybe the challenges?
Yeah, we've been in a lot of masterminds, and we've been actually on stage in front of hundreds of people asked to speak about, how to work together, because people on social media see us as like a power couple that does business together. And of course, we all know that social media is the highlight reel. Like there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes, and it's not all rainbows and butterflies. So what I see most commonly is when couples want to start working together, it's usually the male is already, hands-on involved in whatever they're doing, and they want to bring their wife out of their job or into like bookkeeping or something like that, because I think most commonly that is, or that's a common dynamic, but maybe she's not good at bookkeeping, or maybe she doesn't like bookkeeping and she's better at something else. So I would just encourage couples who want to work together potentially to figure out what their unique genius is, what they're the best at, and then how can they fill that role in the business, and then sub out the things like I've done bookkeeping, but I'm not the bookkeeper, because there's somebody that's better at that than me, and I'm better at other things. So it's good to be able to know how to do all the things and to be willing to do the thing, whatever it takes. But as a couple, you want to be in doing something that you're happy doing, because you're going to be spending a lot of time together. And so you want to get along as much as possible.
But it sounds like you're talking about roles and responsibilities. So welcome to a business partnership, right? So you're saying essentially it's very similar to, like, even technically if it was, a party business partner relationship, kind of treated similarly, where you really have responsibilities.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Josephine. I think you nailed it right there. It's got to be looked at as any other partnership, not just husband and wife. What are you best at? How is it going to contribute to the team? How's it going to further the company? And not just, I'm doing this because it's my wife or friend or family member or whatever, because we all know that usually goes sideways if they're not qualified to do the job, right?
Yeah.
So, and some people want their wife to work with them, but their wife doesn't want to work in the business. And so some people have hopes and dreams for their spouse that their spouse doesn't have. Jennifer and I just happen to come together synergetically in a way that I'm more of a visionary. She's more of a detailed person. So our partnership aligns in a typical fashion, that you would look for whether we were married or not. And so I
So-
think that is super important. Yeah.
So are you guys really having structured meetings, like sort of where you two, like as management, really, come together, have a management meeting? Do you by now have like other additional management members? I know you guys have massively scaled over the years, which has been really cool to see. I'm a huge fan of what you guys do. I've, walked some of your homes. So kind of curious, have you now added sort of management, or is that even hard because it's been always you two? Or yeah, do you have those conversations, like seemingly basically managed conversations, slip into like your private time as well?
Yeah, we have added different people to different roles throughout the years, and some have come and gone, some have stayed. We've taken different roles, to fill those spots. And sorry, what was the original question?
Kind of, yeah. So like, are you guys like setting really managed meetings where it's just you two chatting?
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
and we've changed those over the years. So gosh, we change it pretty frequently. Right now we have regularly scheduled meetings where we go through and do the same things and review. And then, we have different types of meetings and, different people to delegate different things to. And we have to really sit in our seat and fill our role. And as a couple, be considerate and intentional about the fact that we are in a marriage and relationship. But also keep that separate, kind of divide things where they need to be divided. And me personally, I have to be intentional about not getting offended and realize like this is business. We need to take care of this. He's ready to get things done, and I can't take this personally right now. And then we can focus on, being in love this afternoon.
No, I love your input there. So that's cool. In terms of roles and responsibilities, I think so. You're the financial mind, right? I mean, Jeremy's good with numbers too, but you're sort of more like CFO type role, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they would call me like the engineer in our business. I'm doing spreadsheets and going over numbers and giving the final go or no.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so Jeremy handles all of the operative side, right?
Yeah, he's the visionary and the implementer.
Awesome. So obviously you guys have done a lot of real estate. Jeremy and you guys, like you're general contractors, so you build all your own product. And kind of curious, going more into that self-storage realm, what has led you guys to self-storage? Let's start there. I'm kind of curious, like what's the story sort of behind that? What sparked that? And yeah, give a little background to that.
Jeremy, do you want this one or me?
Go ahead.
So self-storage, it's funny. Our story is not like most people. I think that the evolution of an investor is like they're flipping and then they're building and then they're buying multifamily and then they're buying storage. Like I see that happen frequently. Because I feel like self-storage is a little bit better than multifamily because you don't have to deal with fair housing. It's a lot more simple to build and manage. It's got good returns, lower expense ratio, that sort of thing. But for us, it was kind of the opposite. There was this situation that was very opportunistic where there was some land available, and it was a farm, not an active farm, but years prior it had been a farm, but the fencing was dilapidated, the barn was dilapidated, and it was on a highway. And honestly, when I saw the opportunity, I thought maybe I could have a farm. But the liability of cows on a highway and all that just seemed like a lot. And so I also thought this is a great commercial corridor. Maybe we can figure out how to rezone it commercial, but commercial what? Grocery store or gas station, or we didn't really know what would go there. So we asked around. We asked the mayor, we asked a real estate broker. Back then I wasn't licensed. I had a job. And what people thought, and people kept saying storage. And we didn't have any experience with storage. We didn't know what the numbers looked like, the ROI and the cost to build and all that sort of thing. But then we started investigating and seeing, okay, well, maybe storage is the key. And then we had a friend who had built one recently and shared his numbers with us. And we compared those with our numbers and put some costs together. And we actually got a SBA loan for this project, and it was the biggest loan at the time, not now, but at the time. I'd only ever had a mortgage, and the most I'd ever borrowed was like $170,000. But the SBA qualified us for $1 million loan to build this storage facility, and I had no experience, no background, no co-signer, and it just kind of blew my mind that they would even do that.
Tell me more. This is I love what you're sharing. Thanks so much. So I actually didn't know that SBA would really lend on that type of deal. So they lend on the actual ground up construction.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, you can buy an existing boat. You can also do ground up construction. It's not just storage. You can do like a movie theater or a veterinarian facility, things like that. They have a whole list of things that would qualify. And the goal of the SBA, Small Business Administration, to get people into business, right? To help people get a loan for that sort of thing, start a business for that sort of thing that wouldn't otherwise be able to, like with a conventional loan. So I didn't have 20% down on $1 million to take out a loan like that. And how in the world would I stabilize it? I didn't have any, if I did have a down payment, I didn't have the cash to pay the bills until it rented, until it was stabilized. So they build all this into the loan. There's an extra fee, they do make money. It costs a little more interest, but they build in all that security for you to provide that safety net. And actually did not have to put any money down on this. What we did was we bought a house, which we still own now. It's a rental that my mom lives in now. But we bought a house in 8 acres, and the house was on 4 acres, and then there's a 4-acre tract that was already divided next to it. And we took that 4-acre standalone tract and we rezoned it commercial. It was currently zoned agricultural. And so, if you get a piece of agricultural land appraised, it's going to appraise at the lowest value. But if it's commercial, it's going to appraise at the highest value. So we took something that was worth maybe 30, 40,000 at the time, and with a $200 application and a 3-month process and a lot of angry neighbors, unfortunately, we learned about that too. And even an article in the Tennessean, we added $200,000 in equity to it. And that was our equity injection into that $1 million loan, was the value of the land that we added by rezoning.
Was that all? So I used to remember somewhat the terms. I'm curious, so you rezoned it. So did you find out about the SBA loan first, and then you basically, were wondering like, okay, how can I bring more equity to the
Kind
table?
of simultaneously, like we didn't know a lot about anything regarding that sort of project at the time. So now that we've done more, like we have a project that's stuck at TDEC right now because there's a wetland on it. If any of that would have happened in this project, we never would have made it. We didn't have the money to push through problems. But I think we were really blessed in that project that things really lined up in our favor. I mean, if the majority of the commissioners voted against it, it would have been over, and it would be, we would have done something with it, built houses on it or something like that. It never would have been a failure, but it wouldn't be storage. So fortunately, everything lined up perfectly, and we were able to zone it, use that equity injection, take out that loan. Even the loan wasn't perfect. The lender messed up on some stuff, caused us some legal issues, but it all got worked out in the end. The rate was great in comparison to others. It was prime plus 2 was what they did. And there's some flexibility there. Like if you got experience, they might do prime plus like 1.25. But for me, it was prime plus 2, and there's an SBA fee that I can't remember, but it's more than your standard origination fee. But this is probably more than we need to know right now. But that SBA fee came in handy because that goes into a pool. And what happened, there's like all kinds of things that could happen in the economy where they will go and help fund, like pay for your P&I payments. If that happens from that, and it doesn't come from like additional, like from taxes or anything like that from people. So what happened was COVID, and during COVID, big impact on a lot of businesses. They paid our P&I for us out of that SBA fee for like 7 months.
That's interesting. That's such a nifty detail that I don't really hear people talking about. That's really unique. So a lot of, our members are obviously, just getting started, and track record is, is a big discussion, right? Like we're trying to build that, and also like trying to build that team to leverage others to get things done, right? So for your first self-storage development, I mentioned earlier you had a little bit of a mentor. Did you guys give them anything of the deal? Was it just really you and Jeremy? How did you guys go about that? And so the SBA loan was approved without a track record, or what was there anybody?
We didn't have any track record. We didn't have an experienced cosigner. The SBA is looking for, like, do you have good credit? And does your debt to income look good? So you don't have to make enough money to pay the note. You just need to be kind of like if you were to take out a mortgage for your house, like you're not upside down on, your debt to income. And then our mentor. He wasn't so much of like what I would consider a mentor as he was a friend and acquaintance who was willing to share his budget with us. I mean, if you're available, do you want to talk a little bit about Kevin and our relationship with him?
Yeah, he was in the, he was going through, he was at, well, I would say he was at the end of construction of just building almost exactly what we were trying to build. So he had just went through the process for the first time of what we were doing. So he was sharing his experience along the way as we were getting started and he was finishing. And so we were really able to piggyback off him as, you know, a friend and somebody like in a conversation we're having right now of, well, how'd you do it? Or what are you doing? Or what do you see? And he just let us lean on him for advice. He was really thoughtful for that, but he wasn't involved in like day to day like operations or anything like that. So there was no partnership there. He was just a friend who happened to be doing the same thing we were trying to do at the same time.
How many are you guys talking units actually, like self-storage? Yeah. How many units basically did your first self-storage project have? And
So phase one of Synergy was 223 units with maybe like 20 parking spaces. And then we just did an expansion last year where we added some more units. So it's like 488 units with 60 something parking spaces is what we have for our expansion. And so, yeah, this is Rent Cafe, which is like an aggregator. Like if you were to go to, I don't know, Expedia for a flight or something. So Rent Cafe, this is not actually our website, but they did a really good job putting stuff together on there and shows our facility, some of our drive-up units and our prices. And I think they get like a fee for if someone clicks through on them, and you can see there's our facility there. That is our actual website where you get sent to rent a unit. And that's our daughter. Our kids do a lot of work for us.
you're making it a lot of more fun looking at a storage website.
Yeah. We always try to add a little personal touch because we are local, and most of the other facility owners live in California or Arizona or Utah. And although we don't personally like answer the phone and clean the units, my stepmom is the one who cleans the units. My mom lives next door and takes care of anything if we needed her to. My cousin goes and cuts the locks. Like, we are a family owned and operated business. So we try to point that out because we support the community. And I think people think that's important to know that we're locally owned and operated.
That's awesome. No, I love that too. I think it's just like really cool to watch because, I'm obviously here by myself. So you guys are, rocking this as a family. It's a very different business model. I think it's super cool, very inspiring. So what I'm looking at right now is the site map, right? You want to talk a little bit about like how you guys got started with this like first project, just to use this a little bit as a, as an example, and also how you faced it, what sort of like the lessons learned there were, and also like if you want to speak a little bit about how is it like different from acquiring like existing self-storage, right? Because you guys now have a blank canvas and got started designing the site.
Yeah. So tried to get involved with acquisitions and made a lot of offers, done a lot of underwriting. We were in a self-storage only mastermind for a while. And it was really hard to find things that worked with our numbers because we're just real value add investors. Like, I want to buy raw land with no entitlement, add everything to it, do the development and construction, and own and operate it. Like, you can make every deal a home run deal when you do it that way. So find one, especially when everyone wants to buy storage. We just never could find anything that worked for our numbers. We made the offers that worked for our numbers, but nothing ever, worked out for us. But for development, it was a lot easier to make the numbers work. And we made a lot of mistakes on the first one, just not being operators. When you're an operator, you understand like how to lay things out better. And so there's some things that I would do differently, but like one thing that you got to do with self-storage that makes it just really close to foolproof is get a feasibility study. If you're going to take out an SBA loan, it's required to have one. And a lot of lenders will ask that you have one, but if it's a conventional loan, they probably won't ask for it, but you do still need it. And it's going to be about a 100-page document, and it's going to tell you what kind of demand is there. So self-storage is not about emotion like most things in commercial real estate. It's about, how many people live in this radius, how many houses are in this radius, and how much storage already exists. And then also, how full are they, is taken into consideration. Also, what's in the pipeline. And then it will literally populate out a number that in the next this many years, there's a demand for this much, or there's a surplus for this much, which is the case a lot of times, especially recently. And then within 5 to 10 years, what's the shortage or surplus? And it's going to go through all the details, all the supporting figures and data for that, down to the pro forma, which is your Bible that you follow through the month by month lease up, where it's like, hey, I should be spending this much on advertising. I should be leasing this many units per month and at this rate. And then this is the point where I'm going to break even. And this is the point I'm going to make my first dollar. It's going to tell you month over month your pro forma. And that's exactly what the bank wants to see, does this deal make any sense? And then you can just follow that. It's no longer a confusing sort of hopeful game like being in the restaurant business. It's just a math.
You plan for success essentially. You have the metrics and what it takes to perform that. Interesting. So how long did it take you guys to construct the first, I guess, like phase essentially? And I think so. Has it been 3 phases or?
Two phases, and then we have another development in the pipeline. And so from the permit pulling, it was 6 months to construct phase 1, and then a little bit longer for phase 2 because it's a multi-story building. So there's a whole lot more that goes into sprinklers and HVAC and dehumidifiers and 2 stories. Then the drive-up unit, I prefer drive-up units because they're so simple, a slab and metal and some insulation. We do insulation in the roof. Not everyone does, but I think it's really important to capture any moisture or if you have a roof leak. But the revenue for climate,
not only a roof leak, but condensation is something to keep in mind. Because even if it never rains, it's going to condensate metal on metal.
Especially
a lot of water. Yeah.
In this area, especially. Yeah.
Is it around the other self-storage too, or like how far? Because obviously you guys are focusing sort of like on your market, like particularly too, right? Like, so in what radius are you sort of like keeping yourself like apart so you don't sort of, I guess, cross cannibalize your own storage facilities? Like, how far are these apart?
How far are our projects apart?
The self-storage that you have and the one also in the pipeline.
So for our projects, it's one side of the county and the other, but it's important to talk about too, radius of your competitors. So like if you're in a high dense area like downtown Nashville, you're looking at what's within a 1 mile radius. Us, we're looking up 10 miles away. And that's because we're on a highway and it's actually in a low density area. So if someone wasn't from the area and I didn't tell them about the area and they did a feasibility study, they'd say, well, you just don't have the population to need this much storage. But if you take, if you zoom out and see, okay, there's a lot of houses nearby and there's nothing else nearby, and this is the main road that everyone takes to Nashville, so you get the visibility, which is super important. Storage, then that's where the demand comes from here. And so I don't know what the traffic count is now, but whenever we started this project, which, I mean, we did in 2019, but we really started it more like in 2017. And because it takes a while, of planning and permitting and putting the design together and getting bids back and all that sort of thing. But back then it was 10,000 cars a day. And I'm sure it's more now, probably like 15, but that was good. That's good for our area. And that's about 50,000 square foot, I think we have of storage.
Yeah.
Okay. So 10 at the time when you guys underwrote the project, so 10,000 cars essentially, and you guys build about 223 units for that.
At that time, it was 31,000 square foot. That would be 223 units. So now it's 50 or 60,000. I have too many numbers in my head anymore. You know how it gets after you get too many projects down. But yeah, that we did a second feasibility study before we did the expansion to make sure it made sense to expand and everything. And we're doing better than projected. But for a moment, we weren't. This time last year, we were losing net rentals like 10, 20 a month. And it was a really scary time. And a lot of people have seen kind of a change in storage just because the change in discretionary spending and the surplus of storage that's been built. And so we've had to revise our strategy, and we're dumping a lot of money in marketing, and we've turned it around for the better, but it took us a hot minute to figure out how.
So you mentioned the feasibility study, and we've talked a lot in the academy also about feasibility studies and how they're different, like commercial versus residential. Commercial, obviously they're a lot more involved. So for the traffic study in itself, who did you guys like basically hire there? Did you guys hire like sort of a market research company, or like do you have some thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
So good question. And here's a tip that you can just Google TDOT traffic and go to their interactive mapping and go to your area and click on the little dot on the road and look back year over year and see what the traffic count is. And that's free. That's a great way to look and see, does this road get the traffic I want it to get? And how does that compare with the rest of the area? Now, a traffic study, now we've had traffic studies, not for this project, but for a different project. And we didn't do it to show us the traffic count because we know how to do that for free. We did it to show the county because the county will say you're required to have a traffic study because they don't know how to do that for free. And you get to pay a couple $1,000s to have a professional click those buttons for you and put it into a report. And so we've done that too.
Okay, so you paid up a couple thousand for that, and is that so? Now is that part of like what you consider the feasibility study, basically the package, or are you like looking also like, for example, really like phase one, like geotech soil samples and all that? I'm curious because right now I've been dealing with this industrial side, and that's like that end of it, right? So curious to see what you've done on the self-storage and what's necessary also for the underwriting and the financing.
Yeah, so we did have to have, the environmental studies also. I wouldn't consider that the feasibility study part of it because that is like its own document, which is really about demand and pro forma. But it is part of the due diligence and feasibility of the project, because if you're building, especially if you're building something heavy and you're going to have to dig and you're going to need to do soil samples, and you also need, let's see, normally we build this in before we purchase the property. So on the most recent one, phase one environmental, right? You want to make sure there's no gas tanks or anything like that. So we made that part of the due diligence that we had to have the phase one environmental, and if there was any remediation that they was going to have to pay for it. So those things and any kind of like ground development, we build into the due diligence phase and we get those done. I mean, I think that was a couple $1,000s too. There are some things too. So here's a situation we've been dealing with that we didn't have it doing our due diligence. We didn't know about it until we were ready to pull the stormwater permit and start breaking ground, is that we have a wetland on our property. And that's a pretty big deal. And so we did all of our construction documents, we did our site plan, we got it approved through the planning commission, we'd had our rezoning done. I mean, months, even years up to this point of work on this new project. And we got all of our stormwater documents submitted to TDEC, which is, Tennessee Department of Environmental Conservation. And TDEC said, this aerial looks like there might be a stream. Well, we know it's not a stream, but you could see that the contour on the mapping. And so they asked us to either revise the plan so that the building setback was further, or to have an environmentalist come out and do a hydrologic determination, which is stuff we didn't have any experience with. So we had to figure that out. We get the HD is short for the hydrologic determination, which I'll call it that for the sake of words. We had them go out there and do the mapping, and it's like a big wetland on the back of the property. And so we're like stuck, and we kind of sat there for a couple of months not dealing with it, and then finally got the train rolling again. It was able to, we did have to revise the site plan, which is kind of like starting all over. It costs us probably $15,000 in revisions. And which, like I said, for that first project, if that would have happened, that would have thrown a wrench in everything. We wouldn't have been able to afford to keep going. This one, fortunately, like we can afford to eat that and keep moving. And we were able to modify it. We're able to build in a portion of the wetlands, and then we have to go get an additional, it's what's called an ARAP, which is an aquatic resource something permit, which I learned about recently because I got licensed in stormwater something or another. The more you do this, the more you like on.
I love that though. That's a fun fact. Didn't know that. But actually, we have one member right now that's dealing with that. So I hope when we open it up to Q&A, she's going to utilize Q&A session, because actually she ran into this for her first development. So this is really
yeah. So, but it's been interesting because the more you do, and you dealt with some environmental stuff, didn't you, where you had to take off some of the soils, and yeah, sometimes you get lucky and there's nothing, and of course, the farther you are out of a highly regulated area, the more lucky you get because there's less rules, right? But over the years, we've got, like, for instance, we had to do a video conference this with TDOT to get a permit to put a driveway onto the highway. Used to, 2 years ago, you just filled out a form and sent it in. And we had to meet with our county commissioner, like, and our engineer and everyone. So things have gotten seriously more regulated and more difficult.
Yeah. Interesting. So now, as you like continue to look for sites, or, if you run across like your next like due diligence, like how would you, like, what is, I guess, like the lesson that you take away from this that you might like, implement now going forward into your process, just to know ahead of time? I'm curious on that specific scenario.
I think the most important thing, and I think Jeremy will agree with me, is to have multiple exit strategies. Like, we are always,
Yep.
whatever's thrown at us, we're always ready to pivot and be able to make money in a different direction. So like with our first project, if storage wouldn't have worked, we could have done a grocery store. And if that didn't work, couldn't do commercial, we could have built houses on it and made money. We could have held it for 2-3 years and made money. Like, multiple directions to go. If we build a house, can we pivot and rent it if we can't sell it, or vice versa? And then on this project, it's 6 acres. We didn't need 6 acres. We needed 3 for a storage facility. So we could go and subdivide it. We zoned it C1 versus C2. So C2 is commercial only. So that means you can do, in this area, you can do any commercial. We could put a gas station on it. We could put a pet grooming spa on it. But C1 is even better because not only can you do any commercial, but you can do commercial and residential. So we also have a house. So it was a trailer park, and we're getting rid of all the trailers, and we actually can't do trailers because it's not entitled to be a trailer park. So we have to get rid of those. We lost $4,000 a month in income by getting rid of those trailers, but there's a house on it. So we can rent the house to a residential tenant or a commercial tenant, and we could build another commercial business on it or build more houses on it. So even though there's a wetland, which throws a wrench in our perfect plans, there's a lot of different ways that we can pivot and still make money on it.
But it also shows, like, I mean, you really got to understand what you're doing, and like be constantly learning, because you the better equipped you are, like with knowledge as really as a skill set, and expand your skill set, the more you're able to do with like sort of these challenges that you can run across. And a lot of times, like, I think things change, right? Like, I mean, we just kind of want to plan for them. So I love that testament to that. So do you do all the due diligence, so including the rezonings and whatnot, so the entitlement side, while you have it on a contract, or are you guys closing after?
Ideally, it depends on the acquisition price. Like, if we're paying a higher price for it, then we would say contingent upon and do that. But in this instance, it was a trailer park. We knew that even if we couldn't entitle it, that we could just not do anything and use that as a leverage point too, because it was a really nasty trailer park. So like, they would really want us to get rid of those trailers and make it commercial, and we are asking to have the power to do so. So it was highly probable that we would get that zoning. And if we couldn't, we could still make good money off of it. So we went ahead and took that down cash. It was actually a wholesale deal that I saw it come through, and I was like, get out there now. There was actually a police raid going on when we went out there to do our walkthrough. And we have some interesting stories about that place. Even today, we were just out there.
Yeah, I bet I've had some crazy self-storage experiences where I just found them downtown living in there as affordable housing. So
yeah, we've never dealt with that, but we also have 54 security cameras, and that's a benefit of when I worked for the Army. I worked in security, so I have like a little bit of more of an awareness to security, and it's important to me. And that's one of the important things to people the tenants, right? Probably the most important, that it's safe and secure.
Especially, I feel like always as a woman, also like going to the site by yourself, right? So who's monitoring the cameras? Do you guys have a VA, or like is it an outsourced person or internal?
No, nobody like monitors the cameras 24/7, but I have it on my phone. Jeremy's got it on his phone. My stepmom, who cleans there, has it on her phone and iPad. Our remote manager has it on his tablet. So a lot of people have access to it, so they can view it at any time that they need to. And then we have gate hours at 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And if people want to rent after those hours, they're not a tenant for us.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because you got to have some rules around it, right?
Yeah.
So what is your minimum project size now? Like if you look at, your next like self-storage, but also maybe your recommendation in order to get started, right? Do you think like the 200 plus like really was just like sort of an ideal way to get started? Kind of thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think like around 200, mid 200s is a really good, safe size. $1 million project, maybe a little bit more depending on the area, because dirt is cheap in our area, or cheaper. You might spend $1 million just to get the dirt in a different area. But I think that's
I
a
think
good
it's more
Okay.
square footage for us with self storage because we want to be at a minimum of 50,000 square feet just for an exit strategy to be able to dump it to the REITs at some point. If we need to dump it, we want to get the highest and best
Oh,
offer we can, and they're not going to buy anything under 50,000 square feet. And so that, to answer your question there, that's going to be our minimum for self storage.
Yeah.
real estate investment trusts, guys. So like that's basically publicly traded, where you can publicly acquire shares of such portfolios. So Jeremy, tell us a little bit more about that. So 50,000 is the minimum that a hedge fund would basically acquire such a self-storage. And is that just for
Yes.
rural areas or yeah?
Well, that's if you have one. I mean, if you had a portfolio of, a bunch of smaller mom and pops, they might buy up something like that. But I think their rule of thumb is 50,000 square feet or less. Otherwise, it's not profitable enough to put in their portfolio.
Yeah. So, but 200 units is not 50,000. That's more like 30,000 square foot. So when I say that, that's like first phase.
Okay.
But I think it depends on the person. Like some people would want to just do the entire project in one phase. Me personally, I'm really, really conservative in our projects and our underwriting. I would rather do it in 2 or 3 phases just to see how the market takes the first phase. And then that way I could pivot on the second phase. And like, if we needed more of this size or needed more climate or non-climate or parking, we can modify and change that. Whereas if you're doing multi-million-dollar huge project with partners and investors and in a volatile economic situation with interest rates, that's pretty risky to me. I would much rather bite it at a pace that I can handle and take on the risk and then build it up, make it perfect. And if I want to sell it to the REITs, be able to sell like where the REITs want to look at it. If it's too small, they're not going to want to look at it.
No, that makes sense. So you mentioned sort of an absorption rate, right? So what is an absorption rate you feel comfortable with on that, like, first phase, before you would even start the next phase? And then the next phase is a separate loan, right?
Yeah. So we call ourselves stabilized at like 85, 90% occupancy. And you never want to be 100% occupied because then you need to raise rate. So that stabilized for a storage facility is 85, 90% occupancy.
Okay. How often do you guys raise rates?
For this one that we have, Synergy, we leave it up to the manager because he gets a commission based on the gross revenue. When I was managing it, and I was in the beginning, it was really hard to raise rates because I knew every tenant and a lot of them were friends or family of mine. And I didn't want, it's like, if you have rental houses, I have the same problem with our rental houses. I don't ever want to raise their rates because they're so good and they pay their rent and they never have any problems. And then if I raise their rates, they're going to move out. So I'm a bad person to ask about that, but rates should be adjusted like every 3 months.
3 months. Wow. Okay. So it's a very much faster cycle than
We don't do it that often.
Upon lease, it all depends on how your leasing is going and what your competition is, obviously. So there's a lot of different variables, and if everyone around you is 100% leased out, and you're the new one coming up, you can kind of set the bar on the prices. But if you're leasing up at the same time as 3 other facilities are, obviously you're competing to be the cheapest. So it's going to be one of those lawyer answers of it depends.
Yeah,
Okay.
but there's a rate management system in the software where you can say, okay, when this unit size reaches this percent of occupancy, it will automatically adjust it this percentage. So there's ways you can set it up and automate it, but we just try to run a report every so often and let our manager have some input on it. because that does directly affect his input, and he is the one, his income, and he is the one that has to deal with the backlash of raising rates.
So similar to kind of like almost like an AirDNA for like short-term rental, where you kind of, I guess, maybe get a little bit of pulse. Is that like sort of a market AI type of tool where it gives indication of like, hey, you can now increase prices by X? Is that kind of?
It doesn't have to do with your competition. It just has
Okay.
software directly. You could, that's what I would do. I would compare with my competition before I change the rates, but the software is just based on your internal data.
Okay, and then the other question that I had earlier was, for the second phase, is that a separate loan or is that all like one loan?
It's a different one. So you could do like another SBA one if you qualified, but we did a conventional loan with our local bank. They actually were like begging to do the loan for us because we're local, right? So we have a track record. It's going to be held locally, and they know what our bank accounts look like. So they wanted to finance that to us, and that's who did. We refinanced out the SBA one, and then financed phase 2 with the local bank.
That's cool. Awesome. Let me see. So before we go into the Q&A, I guess one question, do you guys have any project partners or is it just you guys?
On these, we do not. We have some, like the trailer park, we got seller finance, and then we have a second position lender on it, but they're not partners, like equity partners. We've maybe done what, Jeremy, maybe like one project where we did an equity partner and it just made sense to use lenders, or have we done more?
We've done a few. I mean, we've done a few joint ventures, but
Yeah.
not really we've never really done a partnership, so to speak.
Okay. Yeah. So
Partnerships are hard. You know how it is. If you can borrow it instead of partner on it, and I'm not shooting down all partnerships because a lot of businesses couldn't have ever existed without partnerships. But we're so low risk, and we don't mind taking on something risky for ourselves, but to involve somebody else, especially maybe they don't have experience and they're depending on us to make it succeed. I don't like to be in that situation very often.
Yeah, a different approach. So very, very interesting. But I agree. Obviously, if you can borrow it and go that route, it's a lot cheaper. I mean, that's definitely true for any kind of development, as long as you feel comfortable with that level of equity or debt. Well, let's open it up to Q&A. I see we've got a few questions come in. So Dawn is asking, do they use a specific content management tool? So CRM, do you guys have a CRM that you use that you love?
Content for our social media?
No, so for
CRM.
Client rental, operational.
We're using ClickUp right now.
Oh yeah, okay. You used ClickUp before? You guys love ClickUp?
Well, we're switching to Buildertrend. We like ClickUp, it's good, but we're in the process of switching everything over to Buildertrend, which is it's just more beneficial for what we do since we build a lot of houses and do custom homes and things like that.
Yeah.
It's more integrative for tying in QuickBooks and other things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, interesting. Dawn, I'm gonna unmute you. You raise your hand. I'm gonna let you take that one if that was on purpose.
Yeah, just real quick. So like CRM, customer relationship management, which is I think Click that you said. But I was at the website. Was that like just like WordPress, or did you do something like specific for storage?
Oh, for storage. You're asking about the storage website and when people come in. Okay, gotcha. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. There's a few different major software companies for storage. SiteLink is the biggest one. They end up buying up a lot of the smaller ones and have the greatest capabilities for like reporting, really great reports. One of the things I miss having, because I'm not with SiteLink anymore, because they're also the most expensive, is you could do like a mapping of where all your customers live, that your current existing customers, and that can give you intel as to where do I need to be spending my marketing dollars in Google Ads. But we use Easy Storage Solutions, which is a really good, cheap entry level software. I wish I could go back. It's such a pain to go back. You have to collect all this data, and it's a huge inconvenience for the client or customers. So I'm not switching back right now, but it provides you with a platform for your website and the software, and also with a third-party credit card processing, all the things that you need.
That's cool. Okay. Awesome. Do you see any downside to self-storage?
Well, there's a downside to everything. You have to work.
You control it.
I'll say this. A lot of people say, oh, you're in self-storage, it's a cash cow. Well, that's true, but more like 20 years from now. Like this is a very slow investment. I would encourage anybody that's in development to have a source of faster or even fast and medium income coming in, which is why we do custom homes. We do custom homes for fast money. We do speculative homes and things like that for medium type money that we're getting paid, once every 6 months. Custom homes we can get paid every week. In this self-storage facility, like we haven't even got paid yet, and we've been in it for 5 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
That's the
such a-
long
So
game for us.
because it's a long game. It's not like we couldn't just be doing this self-storage facility and nothing else because we would go broke.
I love that you're bringing this up, because I think people don't really talk about it, right? We're in this era of like Instagram and everything is like clickbaity and you have to have the sexy headline and this and that, right? But nobody really talks about, hey, like this is not going to pay off next year or necessarily, right? But also like we've constantly talking about capital stacks in the academy in terms of like obviously how you stack a capital for projects, but you just raised a point too, Jeremy, just for your personal goals, right? Your family goals, to look at, okay, how do I need to stack different incomes from like fast to like slower and like, short term to like long term. I love that comment. I think that's very important that a lot of people forget. And it really it's very valuable to sit down and plan that and really come up, with a strategy. Yeah, so I love that point. Let's see, we have a few questions. So now Alyssa, so she's working actually right now on a wetland situation. So here, how big is a lot that had the wetland on?
It's a 6-acre tract, and the wetland is maybe
The quarter acre.
no, a quarter acre we are allowed to impact. It's at least a half acre, maybe 3/4 of an
Okay.
acre.
Okay, and so she's asking here too, after getting the determination for the wetland, could you still build what you wanted on there, or did you have to look over that part of the land? Yeah. Did you guys basically have to, like, were you able to work with it? I think you mentioned earlier that I think you're still with TDEC right now, right? Are
Well,
you
we
still
were
with?
revising, yeah, we're getting a new HD, a full HD, because we had a partial one, and we changed engineering firms. So I will say this, if I would have stuck with I'd hired a certain engineer that I wanted to work with because I like the way he does business. He has high integrity and is efficient. I didn't realize that he had changed and opened his own firm. I thought he had somebody working underneath him. And so someone else had been handling our site plan. And I've been working with them, and they had been throwing some really bogus ideas out that really bothered me, but I was trying to be really patient with them. And finally, this came back from TDEC, and I was like, we need to get on a call. There's something not going on correct here. So frankly, someone doesn't know what they're doing. And not that anyone's fault was the fact that there's a wetland there. We just didn't know that. There were just a lot of things that weren't going really well. Well, I gave them the opportunity to do the proposal for the changes, and it would have been very different, more expensive, not as efficient. But I also reached out to 2 other engineering firms, one who we work with on a different project. And then I found the original engineer and was like, hey, where'd you go? Can you bid fixing this for me? And that's who we ultimately ended up going with. And his suggestions made a lot more sense. And we were able to get our density in that area in a way that made really good sense, and to make an impact on the wetland. So you're allowed to actually work with it within a quarter acre of a wetland without doing any kind of mitigation efforts. And mitigation efforts are like a really big deal, where you got to spend like a bunch of money to like create wetlands somewhere else if you're getting rid of wetlands in a certain area. He was able to make the revisions, make them make sense, do it at a fair enough price. And then we still have some area back there that is really more so the setback that wouldn't have really mattered anyways. And that's where primarily the wetlands are.
Interesting. I mean, a civil engineer, or like just in general, your team is so vital, right? Like, because I mean, initially you mentioned early on the call, you didn't know anything about wetlands, and you're like now you're kind of our mini expert on that, type of.
We know a lot about them now. And I'll say, just in business in general, yes, your team, your head on, your team is so important. Like, before being in business for myself, I held attorneys at a certain level and other high paid professionals at a certain level. And now I don't mind questioning them. And I don't mind, saying, hey, you're wrong. This needs to be done differently or changing, because they're just people. They might have a high paid professional degree, but I'm qualified too to ask questions and stop and pivot when things don't make sense. So I definitely look at things and people a little bit differently. I don't have them on a pedestal like I used to.
That's $1 million advice right now here and there. Yeah, 100%. I went through the same evolution. That I think like the whole like experts type of mindset, you gotta trust your gut, and yeah, 100%. Love that comment. Now, and another question here, Dawn, is there other criteria for selecting a site location outside of just like traffic in itself?
Other considerations for selecting a site?
Mhm. Yeah, so for development, like really ground up.
Yeah, one is topography is super important. You know, it's not that you can't build a hill, but do you want to move that much dirt? It might cost you $500,000. We've spent a ton of money on site work where if we would have just paid more for a flatter lot, it would have been a much better deal for us. So that's a hard lesson to learn. Obviously, in commercial, location is everything. Location, location, location. So you might be able to get a good lot out of town at a good price you can afford, but you're not going to get the revenue that you would get if you did it in town, and then maybe you had to partner for the takedown of the lot or something like that instead. So the location, the topography, and the neighbors. If you're doing any kind of entitlement, you better make friends with your neighbors and figure out what they need and want and how to reach that together.
Your recommendation for that? Curious what you guys do, kind of bonding with the neighbors.
Have a good husband who will go talk to them because it's not me.
Jeremy, so now what do you do other than I know what's your approach, Jeremy, if you're you're on here? Okay, you might have, and I know you guys have a lot going on too.
Well, I can tell you what he did. Because I made the mistake of not connecting with my neighbors, all of them that I needed to. And sometimes it's not the guy next door. Sometimes it's the one that lives 10 houses down. But if you can give them the first opportunity to express concerns directly to you and you can appease that, yeah, I think that's much, much better. And what we found out, there was this one lady who is also a developer in our town, and she had went door to door handing out flyers to go against our project. And she had some specific concerns that nobody, had came to her about, and she owned the property next door. It was a rental, and I didn't think it was a big deal because it was a rental and she lived in some fancy house somewhere else. But it was a big deal to her, and we never gave her the opportunity to express her concerns and how we were willing to work together to make sure it wasn't an issue. And Jeremy did. He reached out to her for our second rezoning because we had to do 2 on that project because we did the 4 acres and then the other 4 acres later. And she was like, well, that's all I was worried about. And she, guess what? She never showed up to the second meeting. No one did.
I think, communication is always a big part, right? The better of a communicator you are, the more successful you're gonna be. I think there's definitely some correlation, I think, around it.
Yeah.
Now, Donna's asking, did you find a designer architect that specializes in self-storage facilities? Or how do you go about really that like site layout?
Yeah, good question. So I did it in an Excel spreadsheet on one by one grid for the rough concept. Because I didn't know like in the beginning who to contact, who would do that for me. But like the feasibility will say 20% 10 by 10s, 15% 10 by 15s, that sort of thing. And then you can give that to your metal building supplier. So like we use Spearco in phase 1. There's other companies like Storage Structures is who we use for phase 2, and they'll do the design for you. Sometimes they'll charge you like a little fee or retainer in case you don't use them, that you've got to pay for the design. But a lot of the metal building companies will do the design, the site plan for you based on your feasibility or whatever you tell them in your survey. But I did it myself the first time, and I always do, just to kind of see how would I do this space. There's really more qualified people.
Interesting. And so here, for example, the site design here, that was laid out then by the metal company.
Yeah, that's the lower level of the the 2-story climate controlled building. And I think that Storage Structures, maybe our engineer, I guess we had an architect on the climate controlled building. We had an architect that laid that out, but we didn't have that on the drive up buildings. We went a little overkill on the plans for the climate controlled building. I think I would have had a little less professionals if I did that again. But yeah, because that one was a little more important to have professionals involved because your aisles can only be so far away from any entrance, and got the sprinkler considerations, and there's a lot more moving parts to the climate control building. I really like them a lot less. I like the climate control a lot less.
Interesting, just because there's more to it.
The sprinklers are very expensive. You know, you can't access your unit from the outside. Like, I think if I did temperature control, I would do, like, if possible, right? If your land is expensive, you got to do multi-story. But if I could do cheaper land with one level and some access doors from the outside and some just main hallways through the middle, I don't know. I think there's some different ways I would try to do it. I didn't like all the parts that were involved with that, but it, you know, it makes more money, it gets more revenue. So
no, interesting. That's good feedback. Now we've got one last question here. I want to be sensitive of you guys' time. So refi and cash out, have you thought about that, and how long does it take before you basically will be able to, you know, stabilize it really and basically get cash out if it's such a slow and steady asset?
yeah, so in the feasibility study, they will build out like a cash out plan. Like, I think it was like 7 years or something, where they'll show example of what it would look like with the interest rates and if you did a cash out in this many years. And of course, stabilization is usually, the bank does not want to see it take more than 24 months to stabilize. So for the first phase, I think it was projected at like 13 months, and I think maybe we did it in 11. And this one was a little bit longer, maybe like 17 months projected, and we should be stabilized by the end of this year. But I don't know that, you know, refining is such a personal thing, right? Like, what are you going to do with the money? Does it make sense to restart that amortization again? So I used to always be like cash out, refi, but my goals are a little different now, you know, in a different stage of life. So
It's always like an opportunity cost too, right? Like, do you have, I mean, I'm sure if some project comes up and it's, you know, sort of looks like a home run or a great opportunity, then you would more so be open to pulling out cash here and deploying it elsewhere. But otherwise, you just have it sitting there.
Yeah, velocity of money is really important to us. So we're always trying to turn and get more money and grow and do. But, you know, Jeremy's 40, I'm 38. And at this point, I have to consider too, like, are there some projects that we want to just pay off in 20 years and, you know, use as like, we don't plan to retire, you know, we love what we do, so we plan to work, but we also need to make sure that we have some stable cash flow when we get to an age where, like, what if we can't work, you know, because we can't depend on Social Security.
Oh, totally. So last question, I'm kind of curious, so, you know, what is your vision for like the next 3 to 5 years? You just touched on it. What has you guys excited?
Honestly, just keep doing the same thing that we're doing and continue to optimize our systems so that we can travel more and be able to hand things over to other people to manage for us. You know, we love building houses. I especially love spec houses over custom homes. Jeremy likes doing custom homes. And then, you know, I would like to be able to do more storage projects for my kids as they age into being able to work independently and unsupervised. I'd like to maybe have each of them a storage facility that they would be able to manage and have as their asset.
That's awesome. That's a cool plan. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come, you know, talk to our group here. And how can people get in touch with you if you want to share what works best for you guys?
Jeremy and I are both on Facebook. You know, we're millennials, so we use Facebook more than anything. We have Instagram, TikTok, and all that stuff too. And of course, our websites, we have RubixInvestors.com and RubixLuxuryBuilders.com that have contact forms, but Facebook is probably the best way to keep in touch with us, connect with us, and to see what we're doing, because all of our businesses have pages attached to our personal page on our Facebook.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate your time. And again, if any other questions come up from the group over this week, we'll be in touch and see, maybe we'll do a follow-up. I think that was a wealth of knowledge and so much good stuff, and especially, you know, ground up self-storage development, just like not really enough talked about. It's always existing, just buying existing. So I love that you guys were open to speak there today. And yeah, really thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
See you guys.